For a show that's set to debut in a couple of months, Amazon's released little info about the Rings of Power. The show was announced years ago, and Amazon didn't start spilling anything until the beginning of 2022, and what they did put out went over as well as a naked dwarf and an elvish buffet. This wasn't just from so-called toxic fans, but also regular fans of Tolkien's work who didn't like the changes being made to the lore. That negative backlash probably led Amazon to be more tight-lipped about the show than they were already planning to. It certainly seemed to amp up their pickiness when it came to who they'd show early footage to. As far as I know, every person Amazon invited to view early footage had nothing but positive things to say about it. I don't think that there was any criticism at all, which makes me suspicious. It's not that the show can't be perfect or that people genuinely liked it. It's just that it's improbable that everyone to the man would gush over it without even a small crit to add. It's also telling that Amazon didn't invite any prominent critics of the show to view the footage. That would be the ultimate test. Can you win over the people who don't like what little they've seen? That Amazon didn't do this again makes me suspicious, but not as much as a long drip of info about this show. It's due out in September 2022, and I'm recording this on June 14th. It's about 3 months away, and there's basically no new info about the show. Nothing since what was said in the Vanity Fair article back in February, no new trailers, and just a few new images from the recent Empire magazine write-up. Keeping people in the dark, especially after the negative backlash, is a bold strategy since this is one of the most expensive shows ever made. The first season alone cost $465 million. But in the Empire piece, one of the showrunners made a bold claim. Quote, showrunner J.D. Payne told Empire that people should keep the budget in context, adding that The Rings of Power Season 1 is actually more akin to an 8-hour movie. This is the length of 3 Marvel films, done on a schedule of 2, for a budget of 1. Look at it in the context of what's actually being produced, and you could say that it's a bargain, Payne said. Is that what you told Jeff Bezos? Is he fond of squirrel droppings? If so, I wasn't aware that they came in such big loads. Sorry, I'm not buying this at all. If you managed your money well, that could work, but that doesn't change what it is that you produced. There are multi-million-dollar films that were well budgeted, but totally sucked. Calling it a bargain makes it sound like you don't have much faith in the show, so you're trying to rationalize spending $500 million on a potential flop. Speaking of nonsensical pep talk, there was this bit by one of the directors, quote, Director J.A. Bayona is quoted in the piece too, saying The Rings of Power should not even be thought of as a TV show, because it's breaking new ground in the entertainment space. The Rings of Power is not television. It's a new form we're creating here, Bayona said. Yes, a new form created by the series 24, almost 2 decades ago. I love when people do this. They're over here like Soy Fan, this move doesn't even have a name. And then everyone who's already done this is like Yoruichi going, yes it does. It's called long-form storytelling. You're not breaking new ground. This has been done before. It's literally the reason why Amazon bought the rights to The Lord of the Rings. It's called Game of Thrones. And even now, we still remember how it ended. I would talk about it, but the pain is still too near to me. But it seems someone forgot to tell that to the show's other showrunner, cause this fool goes a-bragging. Quote, The Rings of Power's other showrunner, Patrick McKay, said the first 5 seasons of The Rings of Power represent a 50-hour movie. All 5 seasons are already mapped out, and they already know what the final shot will be. Well, that's nice. Refreshing, actually, that someone planned so far ahead. Of course, there's that pesky problem of what happens if the show bombs, or if you lose actors, or if some, I don't know, pandemic interrupts your show. Did you just write out the plot, or did you build in backdoors like J. Michael Straczynski did when he created Babylon 5? If not, you might be screwed. Then he says, quote, We didn't want to do the TV version of The Lord of the Rings. We wanted to do a story in Middle-earth that deserves its own space on the shelf, alongside the novels and the films, McKay said. Yeah. This is one of the pics y'all released in Empire. Here's another. And another. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm open to being proven wrong, but right now this looks like very expensive, mediocre fanfiction. If you didn't tell me this was supposed to be Middle-earth, I'd assume this was a medieval Benetton ad. But that's not my favorite part. My favorite part is this, quote, We had to ensure that we were bringing something fresh to it and expanding the map. We weren't interested in a sequel or a prequel or a rehash or nostalgia. It had to stand on its own 2 feet as something that felt faithful, but also its own thing. Indeed, which is why the show is titled The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. It includes hobbits in the middle of the Second Age, when they weren't even in that part of Middle-earth yet. No rehashing, no nostalgia. It's so fresh, so new. This entire series is nothing but nostalgia bait. Not even for the books, but for Peter Jackson's films, which is just sad because you have no hope of hitting that peak. Like I said in the previous video, those films are so good that Peter Jackson couldn't top Peter Jackson. And he's Peter Jackson. The decision to base the show in a period of time barely mentioned in the appendices or the Silmarillion continues to baffle me. You have so little to work with that you're going to have to make a lot of it up, and at that point, why not just make your own show? Especially if your intention is to re-envision this clearly medieval setting as a bodega in New York. It's not just lore breaking, it's also disrespectful to the author's intent and frankly lazy. You want to make a fantasy show, but you don't want to take the time to earn the audience, so instead you buy the rights to a popular franchise. Now you want the name recognition to get people to watch the show, but you have no respect for the source material or its author. If you just made your own show, word of mouth would get people to watch it if it turned out to be good. That's what happened with Game of Thrones. The show was doing well, but when people started talking about it, especially with season 3, it got tons more people to watch. The showrunners did this by following the books as best as they could and actually making a good show. When they started to play politics, around the 5th season, things began to go downhill. When they ran out of source material the next season, we got to see just how bad the showrunners were at telling this kind of story. They completely and literally lost the plot. You're starting at season 5, and that's not a good sign. You've spent more time trying to explain how Galadriel will be a badass, and how a story based on European folklore and culture will have a multiracial cast, and how you spent the metric fuck ton of money, but it's really a bargain, and not on anything to hype people up about the show. You're not explaining who the factions are, how you're going to compress thousands of years of time to make this work. You know, the things that fans of Tolkien's works would want to know to get them excited about the show. I don't care about Lenny Henry's overpriced cosplay. Tell me why I, a fan of Tolkien's work, should watch this show, and do it without any nonsense about diversity or representation. Tell me the story reason why I should watch this show. We're 3 months away from debut, and you still haven't done that. You might want to do that sometime soon, cause it would be a shame for this $500 million show to flop. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.